The light does not need all colors to become one. There is a profound paradox at the center of the human experience. We are localized expressions of something immeasurably vast. We appear here as particular bodies, particular histories, particular temperaments, and particular arrangements of desire, memory, pain, culture, and perception. To become a person is, in some sense, to become a boundary, to experience reality from one exquisitely limited aperture and call that aperture I. Yet, the boundary through which we experience life is not necessarily the boundary of what we are. The all that is does not truly fragment when it becomes us. It localizes. It looks through countless eyes, inhabits innumerable perspectives, and explores the seemingness of what it is like to be this rather than that. To hold one set of values rather than another, and to love these things, fear those things, and encounter the vast remainder of existence as something apparently outside itself. There is beauty in this localization. It allows for intimacy, surprise, relationship, and discovery, the exquisite friction of one expression of being encountering another. But there is also a danger. We can become so identified with the particular form through which we experience reality that we mistake its contours for the contours of reality itself. Our worldview ceases to be a perspective and becomes the world. Our values cease to be a heart song and become the only acceptable melody. Our community ceases to be one hearth among many and begins imagining itself as the rightful climate of the entire earth. Difference then becomes difficult to experience as mere difference. It becomes error, contamination, and threat. There is a moment when we encounter something that does not fit our understanding, a belief unlike ours, a way of living we would never choose, or a person whose values move sideways to everything we hold dear. Before the argument begins, before language, before any of the principled explanations we may later offer, the body often reacts. A subtle contraction, a tightening somewhere beneath the ribs, a small internal movement that whispers, danger. Perhaps we are detecting an actual threat. Perhaps something in the interaction is coercive, manipulative, or unkind. Perhaps the body has recognized a pattern before the conscious mind can name it. Or perhaps we have simply reached the edge of our familiar world. A sensation is information. An interpretation is a hypothesis. The spiritual work begins in the space between them. In the half-second after the flinch, before sensation hardens into verdict, and verdict becomes permission to punish, the dance of awareness and form. In the language my soul reaches toward, this is part of the eternal dance of Shiva and Shakti. Shiva is spacious awareness, the silent, luminous ground capable of holding all that arises without being diminished by what it holds. Shakti is the living movement of that awareness into form, color, sensation, personality, polarity, relationship, contradiction, desire, invention, devotion, grief, rebellion, community, destruction, healing and play, stillness and wildness, the unmoving and the unbound. They are not two separate realities. Shiva is not a distant witness standing safely beyond manifestation, while Shakti creates an unfortunate mess beneath him. Shiva is the depth of the very water rising as every wave, while Shakti is awareness discovering the taste, texture, friction, and ecstasy of its own infinite potential. The one becoming many is not a cosmic failure. It is not a fall from purity into contamination, nor is it a mistake waiting for some sufficiently enlightened person to correct it. It is the play, the endless improvisation of being delighting in its own capacity to become. When this recognition is allowed to descend from concept into the body, it changes the emotional architecture of difference. If I mistake my present form for the whole of what I am, then your difference can feel like an existential subtraction from me. Every divergent expression becomes a challenge to the reality I have constructed. I must defend my position because I experience myself as the position. I must defend the boundary of my community because I experience the boundary as the edge of being itself. But if awareness is what I most fundamentally am, then I am not diminished by the existence of another form. Your strangeness is not happening to me. It is arising within the same unfathomable field of consciousness from which I arise. The same light looks through your eyes that looks through mine, even when the shape of your life is something I would never choose, never enter, and perhaps never fully understand. Pluralism, from this perspective, is not merely an uncomfortable political compromise reached because human beings cannot agree. It is the natural ethic of recognizing that unity expresses itself as multiplicity. I do not merely tolerate the infinite diversity of Shakti. I revere her. I revere the strange and shimmering riot of existence spilling itself into different faiths, philosophies, identities, relationships, aesthetics, communities, and ways of loving. Most of these forms were not designed for me. Many will never resonate with me, and some may even repel me. Reverence does not require participation. To say that everything is held within awareness is not to say that everything is identical, equally wise, equally beautiful, or equally aligned with the life I wish to live. The sun touches the flower and the compost alike, but that does not mean one eats from both. I can move toward what resonates with my heart song and away from what does not. I can decline an invitation, leave a room, make a boundary firm and clear, or oppose conduct that intrudes upon the sovereignty of another. Discernment is not the enemy of spaciousness. It is one of Shakti's movements within it. What spaciousness removes is not the no, but the hatred in the no. It rescues preference from domination and discernment from condemnation. I can decline the dance without burning down the ballroom. Communities organized around love. There is a distinction I find useful between ideological identity and ideological conformity. A community can form around an ideological identity without requiring complete ideological conformity from every person it encounters. Identity describes what a community loves, what it values, and what it is trying to create. It acts as a center of gravity, a hearth. It is a localized field of resonance where kindred spirits gather and say, "This is the song we have gathered to sing. Come closer if it warms you." Its values are generative. Its life force moves toward creation, toward tending something beautiful, meaningful, and specific. Human beings need such places. Temples, studios, guilds, laboratories, recovery rooms, grief circles, families, and monasteries. We need spaces of rigor, softness, devotion, transgression, contemplation, discipline, and play. A community has every right to say, "This is what we are tending here." The fact that a space is not designed for everyone is not itself an injustice. A sanctuary that must equally accommodate every possible activity soon ceases to function as a sanctuary. Yet, a community's center can gradually become a perimeter. Its attention can shift away from the thing it loves and toward the continual detection of whatever might threaten it. Its values cease to function as a song and become a border to patrol. This is when identity begins hardening into conformity. The rules of a community do more than regulate behavior. They create incentives, train attention, and reward particular interpretations of human interaction. A community that repeatedly responds to difference through curiosity will cultivate curious people. A community that approaches conflict through precision, conversation, and proportion will help its members develop those capacities. Conversely, a community that responds to every discomfort by locating an enemy will train its members to experience discomfort as evidence of hostility. A community that rewards moral certainty, public accusation, and rapid exclusion may gradually produce people who are highly skilled at detecting impurity, but increasingly unable to relate to the human being beneath it. The question is not merely whether a community has the right to establish a rule, for it often does. The deeper question is, what qualities of consciousness does this way of enforcing the rule cultivate? Does it produce discernment, grace, emotional stability, and a greater capacity to navigate complexity? Or does it produce rigidity, suspicion, and dependence upon external conformity for internal peace? A community may be perfectly entitled to create a highly curated space and still participate in patterns that deepen tribalism. These things are not mutually exclusive. The language of safety, care, and respect does not automatically make a method wise. Neither does questioning the method prove that the underlying concern is illegitimate. Sincere care can become coercive when fear contracts its field of perception. A valid boundary can be maintained through indelicate tools, and a delicate problem can be struck with so much force that the attempted solution produces more fragmentation than the original friction ever would have. Discomfort is not a final verdict. A great deal turns on our ability to distinguish discomfort from harm without trivializing either. Harm involves a meaningful violation or degradation of another being's body, agency, psychological integrity, freedom, relationships, or material capacity to participate in life. Force, coercion, threats, manipulation, sustained harassment, or the capture of someone's choices through violence, fraud, confinement, or dependency, they are not meaningfully permitted to escape. Discomfort is broader and more ambiguous. It may be the sensation of encountering danger, or it may be an old wound recognizing the shape of something that once injured us. It may be moral revulsion, grief, shame, envy, uncertainty, or the destabilization that occurs when reality refuses to fit our existing map. Sometimes discomfort is the first whisper of genuine harm. Sometimes it is merely Shakti introducing us to a form we had not imagined. The feeling deserves attention, but it does not automatically deserve sovereignty over everyone else. A nervous system response is real because it is experienced. Its interpretation, however, is not therefore infallible. To acknowledge this is not to tell people to suppress their instincts or remain in spaces that feel unsafe. One is always free to leave, decline, create distance, or seek support. Rather, it is to ask whether our first internal alarm should immediately become an external command. "I feel threatened" is a statement about one's experience. "You are therefore universally dangerous and must be removed" is an additional conclusion. There may be circumstances in which the conclusion is warranted, but it should not be smuggled into the feeling as though the two were identical. The work is learning to remain in the gap long enough to ask, what concretely happened? What am I sensing? Is the person before me attempting to harm me, or are they merely refusing to validate my worldview? Is this conduct intrusive or simply unwanted? Would distance be enough? Would a conversation help? Would a clearly stated boundary solve the problem? Am I responding to this person or to an entire category I have placed them inside? The objective is not endless analysis while harm continues. The objective is precision. Revere the being, discern the pattern, respond to the actual intrusion. Use the least coercive means capable of restoring choice and preserve sovereignty wherever possible. Do not confuse refusing participation with condemning existence itself. I did not arrive at this orientation because I have never known force, quite the opposite. I know what actual threat feels like in the body. I know something of the nervous system that learned to brace before the conscious mind understood why. Perhaps that is part of why I resist stretching the language of violence until it covers every friction, disagreement, or social wound. Not because those experiences are unreal, nor because they cannot hurt, but because discernment matters, and because the bluntness of our tools matters. Conversation is not violence. Criticism is not violence. Exclusion is not physical assault, though it can still wound and function as social coercion. Words are not harmless, but neither are they identical to fists. When every unwanted experience is described with the language of maximum emergency, we risk losing the precision required to recognize and respond to the emergencies that are actually present. An ecology of hearths. If one follows these principles outward, a certain social architecture begins to suggest itself. Not a single society governed by one complete and universal doctrine, but an ecology of overlapping, value-based communities held within a broad, pluralistic commons. Imagine a forest rather than a lawn. A lawn cultivates one form of order. It is trimmed, managed, predictable, and intentionally curated. There is nothing inherently wrong with a lawn. The problem begins when the whole living world is expected to become one. A forest contains many forms of order simultaneously. It is layered, tangled, cooperative, competitive, sheltering, consuming, decaying, and becoming. Its resilience emerges not from uniformity, but from relationship among differences. The human world may need both lawns and forests, monasteries and marketplaces, private sanctuaries and broad public squares. Let the hearths be many. One community might be conservative, devotional, family-centered, and highly structured, while another might be anarchistic, sexually transgressive, communal, technologically experimental, or organized around radical individual autonomy. Some may have 1,000 rules and others almost none. The fact that I would find a community restrictive, bewildering, or unpleasant does not mean it should not exist. It may be precisely the form another person has spent their life seeking. A community is entitled to create its own. This is our awesome. It is not entitled to declare that its preferred experience must become the default condition everywhere. A boundary says, not here. Domination says, not anywhere. Broad public spaces, because they exist for many different kinds of people, should tolerate a wide range of expression. Their rules should focus primarily upon actual intrusion, threats, persistent disruption, harassment, monopolization of the commons, not upon requiring ideological agreement. Smaller affinity spaces may curate themselves more strongly. They can establish the assumptions under which interaction takes place and ask those who enter to honor them. But the more ideologically narrow and emotionally protected a space becomes, the smaller, clearer, and more voluntary it should generally remain. A sanctuary has every right to remain a sanctuary, but it does not have the right to require that the entire world become its sanctuary. When someone does not fit a particular space, the response need not become moral annihilation. It can be as simple as, the way you are participating does not align with what we are cultivating here. We have tried to explain the expectations, and the fit still does not seem right. That does not necessarily make you a bad person, and it does not make us universally correct. It means this arrangement is not working. Where possible, I favor reform over excommunication, conversation before coercion, warnings that explain rather than merely threaten, room for adjustment when someone is demonstrating good faith, and mediation where understanding is possible. I favor clean distance when it is not, and perhaps, where welcomed, help finding or creating a space in which the person's way of being can belong. This is not done paternalistically, for we may have read them entirely wrong. They remain free to decline our interpretation and discover their own path. The objective is not to ensure that everyone belongs everywhere. It is to stop treating incompatibility as proof of depravity, the infrastructure of freedom. Freedom of association is only meaningful when accompanied by freedom of dissociation. A person cannot meaningfully choose to remain within a community if departure means starvation, homelessness, medical abandonment, loss of communication, or the destruction of every relationship through which they participate in human life. A gate may appear open while terror guards the road beyond it. This is why some basic material commons matters, not merely as an economic program, but as infrastructure for sovereignty. In Indian classical music, the tampura holds a continuous foundational drone beneath the movement of the melody. It does not dictate what the musician must play. It creates a stable ground from which improvisation becomes possible. Society requires something like a tampura. Access to food, shelter, healthcare, education, communication, and movement creates the steady ground from which people can take meaningful risks, build unusual lives, join demanding communities, and leave those communities when they no longer align. The drone does not constrain the melody. It makes fearless melody possible. No one should have to purchase belonging with obedience. This becomes especially important for children who enter communities before they possess the capacity to understand or leave them. Every child is formed within a worldview. Every family and society transmits assumptions about morality, authority, gender, relationship, labor, spirituality, success, and what a human being is supposed to become. Only unfamiliar conditioning tends to be called indoctrination. Dominant conditioning acquires enough social power to appear neutral. Children should therefore not be treated as raw material belonging either to their families or to the state. They are emerging sovereigns. Families and communities may transmit their identities, but the larger commons should preserve enough permeability that, as a child's capacity develops, they can encounter other possibilities and gradually participate in determining who they will become. The goal is not a childhood without influence, for such a thing has never existed. The goal is that the person emerging from childhood eventually has enough awareness, support, and freedom to look at what they inherited and say, yes, this belongs to me, or no, this does not, or perhaps, some of this is mine and some of it is not. The translators between worlds. An ecology of difference requires people capable of standing between worlds. Translators, bridge builders, and grounding rods for the social charge generated when radically different value systems encounter one another. These are people who can understand why one community experiences another as threatening without reducing either side to its fear. They can say, "I understand why this frightens you," and "I understand why this matters to them." They do not flatten real differences into the claim that everyone secretly believes the same thing, nor do they rush to resolve every conflict into a hero and a villain. They help people remain human in one another's perception. This is not passive neutrality. It is a form of courage. Modern discourse often rewards escalation more than translation. Condemnation produces rapid solidarity, and certainty travels faster than nuance. A person who slows the movement toward collective judgment may be accused of insufficient loyalty. Curiosity becomes complicity, and refusing to hate the approved enemy becomes evidence that one secretly belongs to them. The translator absorbs some of this charge without merely redirecting it as blame. They keep the interaction relational for a few moments longer, and sometimes those few moments are enough for a more intelligent possibility to emerge, a soul large enough for the world. No architecture, however elegant, can compensate indefinitely for the absence of inner maturity. One can write every correct rule and remain a tyrant in one's soul. The deeper requirement is the slow cultivation of a nervous system capable of encountering difference without automatically converting it into danger. It is the ability to feel another person's expression land in the body and not immediately require that sensation to mean one is under attack. It is the capacity to remain rooted enough in one's own being that disagreement does not become disintegration. This does not require universal intimacy. Pluralism does not ask us to embrace every person, enter every community, or reconcile every contradiction. Distance can be compassionate, and separation can preserve peace. Sometimes the kindest and most honest response available is, "I do not understand what you are doing. I do not want to participate in it, and I may even find it disturbing. But I do not need to control you, erase you, or organize my identity around condemning you." That sentence, lived rather than merely spoken, is much of what I mean by a soul grown large enough for this world. It is a soul no longer trying to make the world safe by making it small. It is the discovery that my peace does not need to be purchased through your conformity. The light does not become less pure when it enters the prism. It becomes visible. Each color is not a corruption of white light, but a revelation of something the unity contained, but could not display until it passed through form. To demand that all colors collapse back into one before we allow ourselves to feel safe is to misunderstand why the light entered the prism at all. Each life is one such refraction, a particular angle of the infinite. We are singular arrangements of the same luminous isness, tasting what it is like to become this body, this mind, this longing, this contradiction, and this strange and beautiful movement through time. Shiva does not lose himself in Shakti, he discovers himself through her, and Shakti is not diminished by being held in Shiva's awareness. She is invited to become more fully, ecstatically, and unapologetically herself. The stillness cherishes the movement, and the movement gives the stillness something to taste. Lover and beloved, apparently two but eternally one, opening into one another and becoming intimate with every texture of existence. This is the play. It is not a sanitized world in which nothing difficult arises, nor is it a passive spirituality incapable of saying no, or the denial of conflict, cruelty, or the need for protection. It is the willingness to meet each moment with enough spaciousness to discover what it actually asks of us: conversation or silence, closeness or distance, resistance or surrender, a boundary or an opening. The light of one's own being does not provide a rigid program. It illuminates the next step and asks us to trust our discernment enough to take it. Perhaps that is all alignment ever is. Not certainty about the whole road, but intimacy with the living pulse that knows the next movement. It is a heart song beneath the noise, a subtle rhythm beneath the argument, and a quiet awareness within the contraction, already holding the discomfort, the other person, the boundary, and the immeasurable field in which all of it appears. As always, take what serves you and leave the rest. Blaze your own path. Build your own hearth. Sing the song that is yours to sing, and allow others the dignity of discovering their own, even when their rhythm is strange to you, even when you cannot dance to it, and even when loving the freedom of being means stepping gently away. May you build hearths without empires, sanctuaries without crusades, and boundaries without hatred. May you become spacious enough to let the unfamiliar remain unfamiliar without immediately naming it an enemy. May your discernment remain sharp, your heart remain soft, and your sovereignty become so deeply rooted that the freedom of another no longer feels like the diminishment of your own. May peace favor you. May the light of your own being illuminate your path, and may your heart song call to you, singing the song you most want to move to as you drift, wild and rooted, through this one borrowed, luminous life.